Some say things are getting radical. Others say it's all long overdue. I'm talking about a feature of this 2020 race, platforms that are clearly focused on addressing long-standing economic, racial injustice. At these debates, we've seen many issues take center stage, including reparations becoming a mainstream topic. Some candidates also promoting policies to address the racial wealth gap, including bond proposals for newborn children in low-income households, or an idea of universal jobs you may have heard. And of course, these ideas don't just come out of nowhere. They come out of decades of advocacy, of activism, as well as research by academics that informs many of the proposals we're now hearing about. That includes the work of Professor Darrick Hamilton, who's actually been name-checked by some of the top candidates.
Economic justice is a moral imperative. With such an approach, economic inclusion becomes an explicit goal, regardless of context that we live. It is wealth that begets more wealth. That's why we advocate for baby trusts, an economic birthright to capital for everyone. The idea of a federal job guarantee is not new, nor is it radical. We talked about human rights, civil rights. The next frontier is economic rights so that people have a base level of resources.
And Hamilton has advised several candidates and helped been basically one of the engines intellectually of what is now a mainstream conversation on race in America. These are just some of the candidates who's consulted him or his work. And all of this is changing the way people who might be president propose ideas on these issues.
I'm reading some articles right now by an economist named Darrick Hamilton that talks about how wealth has accumulated in this country that disproportionately favors white households at the expense of black households.
Let's deal with the racial wealth gap in our country. I will remove the barriers that black Americans face when they go to qualify for a home loan.
We know that there's differentials in wealth that are inherited from bigoted policies of our past.
The fact that a black person is 4 times as likely as a white person to be incarcerated for the exact same crime is evidence of systemic racism.
Racial equality must be central to combating economic equality.
We live in a country now where the president is advancing environmental racism, economic racism, criminal justice racism, healthcare racism.
We need to recognize that when it comes to the economic gap between blacks and whites in America, it does come from a great injustice that has never been dealt with.
Darrick Hamilton, Executive Director of the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at Ohio State University. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for that introduction.
Well, we just pulled on what you've been doing. How many people running for president have you been in touch with now?
I'd have to think about that number, but I'd say quite a few, probably more than 4.
What does it mean that your work, which people may not have heard a lot about, or at least read directly, is now getting this kind of traction?
I think we're ready for change. I think the Democratic Party recognizes that America is ready for bold change to get us out of that rut that we've been in of basically 45 years of stagnant wages.
You look at median net worth and what a difference it is in this country. White households, 170,000, Hispanic 20,000, black 17,000.
Yeah, no, it is dramatic. I mean, we could start off with the fact that wealth is unequal in America, period, regardless of race. But then what becomes more disturbing is one's wealth position is more determined by race than things like education, income, or things that might be related to class.
When people say, oh, but if I could go to school, if I could get a nice degree like yours, that would shift things. You're saying, actually, no, it depends on whether that person going to school is black or white in this country.
And there's one statistic that vividly displays that. The fact that if you're a black family and your head graduated from college, you typically have less wealth than a white family where the head dropped out of high school. And again, one needs to really consider what wealth can do for you in your life. If you want to start a business, you need some capital. If you want your children to go to an expensive school, you need some wealth. I mean, if you're faced with a crisis in health and you're having problems with your health insurance, wealth is a protective factor.
What if you want to start an international branding and hotel company and then get bailed out from bankruptcy?
Exactly.
You don't have to answer that. But a person who worked for the person I'm mentioning, this is a Trump campaign spokesperson who's worked for them, was railing against this idea of the universal jobs guarantee, which is you and other academics have looked at. Take a listen.
we are at what economists consider full employment right now. Every day we're reading headlines across the country about companies that are adding jobs. The problem in many areas is not enough workers, not too few jobs. So this just seems to be a stretch to try to appeal to their crazy liberal base on the coasts, and I can't see it going anywhere.
What's the plain English response to that?
Well, he's part right in the fact that the problem is we don't have enough jobs. Exactly. That's why we need a federal government to ensure that we have an adequate number of jobs so that everybody can have agency that comes about from having a job. The other point about full employment, well, we need to consider what is the nature of work today versus, for instance, the nature of work in the past. If we have people working with poverty wages, if we have people that are in unstable working conditions where you don't know how much you're going to work from week to week or how much your income is going to be from week to week. If we have a job without protection, that's very different than a job that offers you the dignity of decent wages, decent benefits.
You are operating in this space between big ideas that might only get their reckoning in decades or never. And then the political thirst by many people who share your ideology, if you want to call it that, or the concerns you have. They want to beat Trump no matter what.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how you navigate that as you advise or talk to different candidates. And I want to put up it depends how you ask the question, but some of your ideas, do run up against a lot of skepticism. Look at when you ask people, should the free market or the government make these big decisions about wealth distribution? For Republicans, 91% to 7%. For independents, 66% still say free market. And for Democrats, it's basically split. Take it all together, and the core, I'm simplifying because I'm not as studious as you, but the core of some of your proposals, which is the government comes in and tries to fix these gaps, right, is facing skepticism there from people who say that's not the government's role.
Yeah. I mean, we need a granular understanding of history to really understand these big ideas as well. I like to point out that nothing that I'm proposing hasn't been proposed in the past in some way or some fashion or the other. For example, Roosevelt was talking about a federal job guarantee. I mean, he was talking about an economic bill of rights, which is the next evolution. So these aren't radical ideas. Let me start with that.
Did you know when you started out that you would have this much access and a seat at the table? And does it change anything that you do? Does it make you cooler with your students, et cetera?
I mean, in some ways, this is the silver lining of Donald Trump. These big, bold ideas now are on the table. I mean, the question of what is possible in America has been fundamentally changed. We are not going to stick with the status quo. We now have a scenario where we can really think outside of the box of a new vision.
Well, you talk about getting out of the box. Some of the ideas that have been pulled out from outside that box are coming from some of the books and work that you're doing. So, Professor Hamilton, thanks so much for coming on The Beat.
Thank you, Ari.
Really appreciate it. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.